Good afternoon and welcome to this UniTaster Tuesday. My name is John. I'm here from UniTasterDays and I'm going to be hosting this event today where we're going to be exploring a really common subject that universities cover, but also a really popular subject with students, and that is personal statements. And I'm delighted to be joined by three exceptional speakers talking about three really useful topics within the broad area of personal statements. So just to introduce our speakers today, I'm joined by Arione McQueenie, who's joined us from the University of Buckingham. Arione is a UK Student Recruitment Manager, and she's going to open things up in a few minutes' time, looking at really two main areas. One, Arione's going to look at the things to avoid when it comes to personal statements, but the big area she's going to talk about is what personal statements are, and really how you can start structuring them when you start working on yours. Then our second speaker is Becky Denmark, who is joining us from the University of Surrey. Becky is a UK and EU Student Recruitment Officer, and Becky is going to build on some of the stuff that Arione's talked about and link about. And what Becky's going to talk about really is how to get started when you're actually writing one, and some really useful top tips when you're writing them as well. And then our final speaker, last but certainly not least, is Tom Neaves, who's joined us from Swansea University. And Tom is going to cover a subject I'm always asked when we run personal statement sessions, and that's how do you write a personal statement for a combined university course? And what that is, a combined course, and Tom's going to talk about what combined courses later on, but essentially when you're applying for more than one subject area, because you're often told when writing personal statements to focus on a particular subject. So what do you do when it comes to combined courses when essentially you're going to be applying for more than one? Always conscious with these events, you've tuned in to hear from our fantastic speakers, not for myself. So final thing for me to say is really warm welcome to you, whether you join us live or watching back on the recording. Hope you find the event really useful. And if I can pass things now to Arione McQueenie, UK Student Recruitment Manager at the University of Buckingham. Over to you, Arione.
Okay, great. So yes, so like John said, I'm going to talk to you a bit today about what a personal statement actually is, how to kind of start writing it, so that structure that you're looking for, and then also some common mistakes to avoid. Firstly, what is a personal statement? I think one of the main questions I get asked around personal statements is, how important actually is it? You know, how much do we actually read that personal statement? You know, how much weighting do we put on it when making a decision about your application? And my advice here would be, it is a really integral part of whether you're applying through UCAS or whether you're applying directly to a university. We are always going to read that personal statement, and it is going to be something that's taken into account. Now, the first thing we'll look at with your application is most likely going to be your grades, so what your predicted grades are, just to see whether they match our entry requirements. But then the next thing we're going to look at is that personal statement. And really, it's the only part of the application where we get to find out more about you in your own words. The rest of your application is, very data-based. It's your predicted grades. It's a little bit about you and what your teachers are saying. But this is really the only part where you tell us about you. You really kind of sell yourself, what you're interested in, what your motivations for doing a subject are. And it really just gives us the opportunity to learn more about you. So it is a really important part of the process, and it is definitely something you need to take your time with to make sure that you're getting it right. In terms of what it actually looks like, so what it's actually built out of, it's 4,000 characters or 47 lines of text. And your UCAS application isn't going to let you go over that amount. It's going to cut you off if you try to go over that. So it's another reason why it's really important to get started on it early, so that you're giving yourself time to get it into that character limit, to make sure that you're not going over, because that actually isn't too many words when you think about it. 4,000 characters is actually not that much. And especially when you're really trying to sell yourself, get who you are across to that person, this is kind of the one opportunity to do that. It's actually quite hard to get it down into so few characters. So it's definitely something that you'll need to take your time with and make sure that you're getting it right. Another important thing to remember about personal statement is it's one size fits all. So what I mean by that is you have one personal statement for all 5 of your university choices. So you get your 5 options through UCAS, and this personal statement is applicable for all of those. So again, you've got quite a delicate balancing act here. You want to be specific enough that you're telling us about you and your interests, any research that you've done, any work experience that you've had. But then you also need to be general enough that you're not mentioning, any universities by name. So you're not saying, I want to apply to XYZ university, or I did a taster day at X university. You'll have to make sure you're not including those things. Obviously, we'll know that you do have a preference for a university. That is always going to be a first choice that you have, but it is considered a bit of a faux pas to put that down. So make sure you're not mentioning any universities by name, and that you are kind of keeping it general from that point of view. And then one of the main ways I think about the personal statement is it's the big picture. It ties together all the other aspects of your application. So it will tie together your predicted grades, it will tie together your references, anything else you've written in that application. It really kind of ties it all together and just gives that overview of you, why you're going to university, what you want to do in your career, what are kind of your aspirations. And it just gives us a really nice overview. So really important, think of it as that opportunity to sell yourself. It's very similar to a cover letter that you would have when you apply for a job. It's that kind of selling yourself portion of the application. Okay, so I'll take you over a basic structure now. My key piece of advice here would be take a look at the websites of the universities you want to apply to. Have a look whether they talk about what they look for in a personal statement. That's a really good kind of insider tip. Take a look at what specific universities are looking for, because there will always be slight variations on this structure dependent on kind of what the university wants that emphasis to be on. But this is kind of a basic structure that I think would serve you quite well in the first instance. It's always something to build around, but this is going to kind of give you those bare bones. So the first part of your personal statement should always be your motivations. So why are you looking to apply to a particular program? Or as Tom's going to take us over later, why are you looking to apply to a couple of different programs? But ultimately, this is kind of your motivations. So in here, you might talk about your career aspirations. So, if you want to be a lawyer, you're probably studying law. That's quite a clear motivation for studying that program. But it could also just be something in general, a passion for a subject. If it is a passion, if it, you don't have a specific career goal in mind, my advice here would be as specific as possible about what you're passionate about and why you're passionate about it. Think of what was that key moment that made you want to study English literature? Was it a specific book that you read? Was it something that you did in school? And really talk about that experience, really go into depth. This part is a really good opportunity for you to tell us something we haven't read in another application. Your motivations are probably going to be quite personal to you. So, that's going to be something that's unique. We won't have read that before. And that's always good in a personal statement. Tell us something new, keep us interested. My advice here from a University of Buckingham point of view is that we like past experiences, we like something that's quite personal. So if you have, a really personal reason, maybe something that's happened in your family, something that's quite a personal experience to you, please don't, feel afraid to mention that. That is the kind of thing that we do want to hear about if it is kind of contributing towards that motivation for studying a subject. Next part should always be your skills and experience. So any work experience, any volunteering, any hobbies. This doesn't necessarily have to be subject related. I think that's quite a common mistake that a lot of students think, work experience isn't important if it doesn't relate to the subject I want to study. And that's completely not true. We want to hear about any work experience you've had, if it's part-time work in retail, if it's volunteering at a old people's home or something like that. We want to hear about all these different things. Key piece of advice here though would be tell us what you learned from that experience. So always say, I work part-time at X. What I have learned from that is X, Y, Z. If you can relate it back to your subject, then fantastic. That's going to look really great, but it's not always necessary to do so. A good thing to also include in here is any research that you've done. So if you've done a taster day, if you've attended a summer camp, anything where you've done a bit more research into a subject. So if you don't have any subject-specific work experience and you're a bit worried about that, maybe doing a taster day where you get a bit of insight into studying would be a really good way to build in that subject-specific side, because it shows that you've done that research. You've taken the time outside of school to really think about whether that subject is a good fit for you. And then the last section should be kind of your any other information. So why would you be a good student? Why do you want to go to university in general? What do you want to do when you get to university? Do you want to join the sports club, a theatre society, loads of different things. Tell us about how you're going to get involved in student life, because being a student isn't just about your degree, it's about all the extracurricular things you do as well. Talk about your gap year if you've had one. So if you have taken a year out, please do reference it. Don't just leave it as a blank space. And again, tell us what you learned from that gap year. So did you work? Did you travel? What did you learn from those experiences? And then conclude. So this is quite a basic structure. You would definitely build upon this, but this is kind of going to give you those bare bones of what you're looking for. And then just quickly, a couple of things to avoid. These are some common mistakes that we see each year. So things like cliches, the point of a personal statement is to kind of tell us something new, tell us about you, and cliches aren't going to help you do that. So avoid all those common cliches, that dreaded opening line that we always see. Since I was a child, I've been interested in studying English literature. That's very much a cliche, and it is a kind of thing that we'll read over and over again. So try and make sure that you are being original. Quotes are something to use with caution. I would say rather to avoid, use it with caution. A common mistake we'll see is someone using a quote to open their personal statement because they think it makes them sound smarter. It's quite an easy way to try and open it. Again, that's something we'll see time and time again, but it's also not telling us anything about you. If you're just sticking a quote in there and leaving it, it's not telling us anything about your motivations, about you as a person. So the caveat to this is if you can really relate back to that quote, if you want to be studying business, if you want to be on a business course, and you have a quote from a famous entrepreneur, someone that's really inspired you, and you can really relate back to that quote and kind of show that, then great. That's telling us about you, it's telling us about your motivations. So in that case, a quote would work well. Embellishing and plagiarizing is one to avoid altogether. It's human nature to embellish our achievements. You'll see people do it on their CVs all the time. But it is very easy to get caught out on, especially if you're having an interview, they will discuss your personal statement with you, and it's very easy to get caught out on those little white lies, and that's not going to reflect well on your application. Same with plagiarism. A lot of universities have software to pick up on plagiarism, and it is going to really negatively affect your application. Humour is another one to use with caution. My advice here would be I've rarely seen humour done well. You need to remember that your sense of humour isn't necessarily the sense of humour of the person reading your personal statement. And that joke that you've included might, not come across well, or actually might even be offensive to the person reading it. So use it with caution. I would say I've rarely seen it done well. And then things like spelling and grammar mistakes. So these should be really easy to avoid if you're proofreading properly. If there are spelling and grammar mistakes, it doesn't reflect well on you and your commitment to going to university. If you are committed, if this is something important to you, you should be proofreading this over and over and over, and you should be picking up on those spelling and grammar mistakes. It's a really easy thing to avoid. and it does really reflect badly if you do have them in there. So make sure you're doing that proofreading. Things with language as well. So a common mistake we'll see is people using, really long words, again, because they think it makes them sound smarter. That word might actually not make sense in the context, but it also doesn't really add anything. We're not looking for you to sound like you've swallowed a dictionary. We just kind of do want to hear about you. We want you to write as you would normally write, for a school essay. Obviously not including any slang or anything like that, but just writing how you would normally write for school. And then that big one, don't use any university names. So that's the top thing to avoid. Make sure you're not mentioning, I want to go to X university. It's not going to reflect well. So just really, really easy thing to avoid. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Arione. I really enjoyed that session. I love the things to avoid at the end where you said about the humour and really seen it done well. So you set the challenge for us all. That's a joke, by the way. Hasn't set the challenge for us all to try and make Arione laugh with the personal statement. Anyway, moving swiftly on. Our next speaker is Becky Denmark. Becky is a UK and EU recruitment officer who works for the University of Surrey. And Becky is going to build on some of the stuff that Arione said. So Arione did a great session looking at the introductory side of personal statements, things to avoid, but also what they are. Becky's going to then now talk about how you can actually get started, but also link to some top tips as well. So whereas Arione very much took one for the team and looked and it's brilliant, I really enjoyed the things to avoid. Becky's going to kind of turn a positive on that and go for some of the top tips of the things that she would suggest we put in there. So with that, and I can see Becky's popping the slides on now, which is absolutely great. I'll pass things over to Becky Denmark, UK Student Recruitment Officer, UK EU Student Recruitment Officer at the University of Surrey. Over to you, Becky.
Hi everybody, thank you so much, John, for that introduction. Arione for your starting introduction there to personal statements. So as John said, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how to start, so the do's and don'ts for personal statements, and we will go from there. So making it relevant. So a lot of students have issues with their personal statement when they first start, and a lot of students really worry about the blank page syndrome, where you're sat there and you're looking at a piece of A4 paper, or you're looking at a blank screen and you're just thinking to yourself, how do I even begin to start this personal statement? My first top tip for you guys is don't start with your opening sentence. The opening sentence can be written last. It doesn't matter what order you actually write your personal statement in, just start writing, just literally start getting words onto a piece of paper. Even if the beginning words that you start writing, aren't actually going to end up in the final draft of your personal statement. Just start getting it out of your head and getting things onto a piece of paper or onto a Word document. Another thing you can do that a lot of students do use these days, because everyone's really tech savvy, is to use voice notes on your phone. So you can record, if you think to yourself, oh, I really want to mention that, just do a little voice recording, or just using the notes on your phone. But basically get everything out of your head and into a format where you can have a look at a bullet pointed list. So that's my first top tip. Get everything into a bullet pointed list, and on some of those things on the list will be much more relevant than others. Some of those things that you've written down, you'll be like, yes, I definitely want to put that into my personal statement because it's relevant for the course that I want to study. But some things that you write down, you might think, oh, it's a bit tentative, I might not want to put that in there, but at least you've written it down. Once you've exhausted your brain of everything that you might want to put into your personal statement, pick your top thing. Pick the action that you've done that is the most relevant to the course that you want to study, the thing that you're most proud of, and the thing that you have to absolutely put into your personal statement. And then put it through the ABC method. So action. So A stands for action. So what is it that you've done? And the example that I've got here is I spent 2 weeks doing an internship at GlaxoSmithKline in the summer. So this student here is telling us that they have done work experience, they have done some volunteering perhaps, and they've basically gone to work at a specific company during their summer holidays. And this is what we call supercurricular. So this student has done something in their own time. Their teachers haven't basically told them to do it. So this stuff goes down really well with universities. So anything that you've done off your own back, like reading a book or going to a summer school or a taster day, that goes really, really well with universities. But for this example, this student is telling us that they've done 2 weeks at GlaxoSmithKline in the summer. Now, if this student just left this example here, then the poor admissions tutor might read that and think to themselves, well, that's nice, but why? Why did you go there? What did you do about that? Like, why? Why are you telling me this? Also, the poor admissions tutor who's reading this might think to themselves, well, who are GlaxoSmithKline? I've never heard of this company before. So what is this relevant to the course? So you do then have to build upon that. And that's what B stands for, so benefit. So how has this action that you've taken actually benefited you in the long run? So for this example, from this, I developed a deeper understanding of the drug development process from conception to production. Now, you may find when you write about the benefit of a specific action that you've taken, that this section might be a lot bigger, but obviously for the purposes of this example, we have made this small, but you might be able to tell us about a whole host of things that you've actually done in your work experience, or tell us about lots of different things that you learned on your summer school, your taster day, or in a specific text that you read. But you are telling us that you have actually gained some deeper understanding about a specific course piece of knowledge that you are actually interested in. If you just left it at the first statement, we could have thought, well, maybe you just sat on reception making cups of tea for people every day. But you have now developed this statement and told us how this has actually benefited you. C, a lot of people think C stands for conclusion, but we actually say C stands for course relevance, and it is the conclusion. But the reason why you are writing a personal statement is to tell us why you are suitable for a specific course, and to tell us about your interests and your goals and your achievements and your deeper understanding of a specific course or subject area that you're interested in studying at university. So we make C course relevance, just to remind people that when you're writing this, you need to relate it back to the course. So make it relevant. So having an understanding of how drugs are developed will be a useful foundation for the pharmacology modules within the biochemistry degree. Now, this student has rounded this up really nicely to let us know that the reason why they did this work experience is to learn more about pharmacology, and this is a specific area that they are interested in within the biochemistry degree program. So Ariane mentioned earlier about positive language and about the language that you use within the personal statement. Another top tip from me is make sure everything that you say in your personal statement has a positive swing to it. So for example, if you did a FutureLearn, which is a fantastic online platform, if you did one of their courses, which are usually free, and there were 4 different sections within that course, and you really enjoyed one of them, but didn't really enjoy the other 3, focus on the section of the course that you really enjoyed and really put a positive spin on it. When we read your personal statement, we want to see that enthusiasm. We want to see that positive energy that you have for that specific course. If you're telling us about everything that you don't like about a specific course area, then it's going to have much more of a negative impact on the reader. So do just think to yourself, am I showing commitment in what I'm saying? And am I showing my enthusiasm for a subject in a really positive light? So do just bear that in mind and think about, as Ariane said, there are specific words that students will use over and over again. And there is one word in particular that if you use this word in front of admissions tutors during UCAS season, they normally sort of roll their eyes at you. But that word is passionate. At Surrey, I've heard it called the dreaded P word, because passionate is a word that everybody likes to use. It's a fashionable word. It's the flavour of the season. Everybody says, I'm passionate about this. I'm passionate about this. My passion for this started at this point. If you find that you're using a particular word over and over again, maybe think about substituting that word for another word that you obviously understand and it works within the context of the statement that you are saying. So rather than talking about your passion for a subject, talk about your enthusiasm for a subject. If you're talking about teamwork and you've mentioned teamwork a few times, maybe you could say collaborated with. So just thinking about the words that you're using, keeping it fresh, keeping it exciting and not being too repetitive, and making sure that the language that you're using and the energy you're putting into the work is positive energy. So do's, so using the right language. This is a formal piece of writing. So you might think biology is awesome. That's great, but don't say biology is awesome. That's why I want to study it at university. Think about a more formal way of putting just how awesome you think biology is. Also, another top tip from me is draft, draft, draft. Now at Surrey, we recommend 6 to 8 drafts of the personal statement. I have seen colleagues at other universities recommend say 7 to 8. I've rarely seen any universities say over 10 drafts, but 6 to 8 drafts of your personal statement. And one of my biggest top tips, I've got lots of top tips. One of my biggest top tips for you to take away today is don't delete anything that you've written. So when you write your first draft of your first personal statement, you might save that on your computer as personal statement draft 1. Copy and paste all of the text from personal statement draft 1, copy and paste it into a new Word document and call that personal statement draft 2, and then start to edit the paragraphs and sentences that you've written. Don't delete anything. Just because you might get to personal statement draft 5, be reworking a paragraph and think to yourself, oh, what was that thing that I wrote a couple of weeks ago in personal statement draft 1? Oh no, I wrote over it. Oh no, I deleted it. So don't delete anything that you've written just because that thought that you might have had at 3 a.m. one morning a few weeks ago might be absolutely golden a few weeks later when you're coming up to the final stages of writing your personal statement. Making your personal statement relevant is really important. If you are applying for a history degree program and you're telling us about a maths summer school, you might want to question if that is actually important for the personal statement. As Arione said, it's 4,000 characters. That's a page of A4. When you start writing your personal statement, actually cutting it down to being concise and fitting within that 4,000 character word bracket can be the most difficult thing. So make sure that everything you're telling us is actually relevant for the course. So do make sure of that. And to be able to do that, you've really got to be sure of your choice. So you've got to do all of the research beforehand into why you want to study this course, be aware of your deeper interest in the course, and really have an appreciation for what studying that course at university will actually entail. So if you're not sure what you want to study at university at this present moment in time, then really start doing that research before, really cracking on with the personal statement, because that research and clarity of knowing what you want to study at university will only help make your personal statement focused and less wishy-washy, because wishy-washy personal statements are not very easy to follow and not very strong. So Arione mentioned this earlier, but do not plagiarize. As well as universities having plagiarism filters, UCAS also has very sophisticated plagiarism filters, and they will be able to pick up if you have plagiarized by copying from Google or copying your older brother or sister's personal statement who came before you. They will run it through across personal statements that are on the internet, and also their existing bank of personal statements from the many years that students have been submitting personal statements. A lot of students get very worried about accidentally plagiarizing, but it's very, very, very difficult to accidentally plagiarize. So if you haven't copied somebody else's work, then you do not need to worry about it. Also, you don't need to overshare in your personal statement. If you've had a reason why you've had time off school, COVID, not COVID, but if there's other reasons why you've had time off of school, then your teachers can put that in their teacher's reference. You don't need to tell us about that in your personal statement. Sometimes this can be different if, say, something happened to you and this is now the reason why you want to study that specific subject. That's fine, because that's obviously your motivation for studying a subject. But if you're just telling us that you've had to have 4 months out because something happened and it's not really relevant to the subject you want to study, then it might not need to be in the personal statement. Don't rush. And also, as Arione mentioned there, don't forget to spell check or grammar check. If you're consistently spelling pollution with one L and you're applying for an environmental science program, that's all we're going to see when we read your personal statement. So it's really important you keep an eye on that. And just going through a few of the most overused opening sentences, which Arione also did touch upon just now, but UCAS did an actual survey into this quite recently, and they picked out some of the top things that students applying to universities put. So I'm currently studying a BTEC national diploma in blah, blah, blah. or I'm currently studying 3 A levels in blah, blah, blah. You would have already told us what you're studying in your A levels or in your BTEC or in your IB or wherever you're studying. You would have already told us that on a previous page on your UCAS application. So you don't need to start your personal statement telling us that information again, because you are just wasting characters. From a young age, I've always been interested in. From an early age, I've always been interested in. I've seen students go further. So from, ever since the day I was born, I wanted to be on the stage. That kind of embellishment is ridiculous. And whilst you might think, oh, it makes me look like I'm really, really keen, it also has no place in a personal statement. This is a formal piece of writing. So do, be honest about when it actually was. You might have had that hallelujah moment, and that's when you wanted to study that specific course. And here's just a few others as well. Quotes, I'm not a fan of quotes either. So it's really nice to hear that in the earlier session about quotes not really being sort of a thing you should put in your personal statement. The third one down here, fashion is not something that exists in dresses only, is a quote by Coco Chanel. I just think quotes are cliche, and they're somebody else's words and not yours. And we want to hear from you, the student. It's a personal statement. It's about you, not about somebody else. But at the end of the day, what is really important is doing your research. So before you can even crack on with the personal statement, you must be really sure about what you want to study at university. And you can do this in so many different ways. You can go onto the UCAS website, you can go onto universities' web pages, and there's a whole host of other things. And also don't forget social media as well. You can follow loads of universities on social media, and a lot of universities' academic course teams have social media as well. So you'll be able to have a look at those and really find out what it is you want to study at university. And once you've got that, you're then able to crack on with the personal statement. But that's everything from me. I'm now going to hand over back to Jon to introduce the next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Becky. Really, really enjoyed that. I found myself smiling at a lot of those things. So really, really good session, but also quite a lot of humour in. So I love the opening lines that the common opening lines that you came up with. And also everyone watching this, if you do end up with a personal statement titled Personal Statement Draft 155, if anyone asks you why it's that draft number, if you go to 26 minutes into this video, Becky will tell you, and the video will be added to UniTasterDays.com/Tuesdays for any friends and family that are watching this live, for any of your friends and family if you're watching this live today. Right then, our final speaker, please, is Tom Neaves. Tom's a Student Recruitment Officer at Swansea University, and Tom's going to speak about a subject that's actually probably very, very tough, because it's one thing that often people are told when it comes to personal statements is just to stick to the subject, because you have the same personal statement for every single one. And therefore, university is going to see how committed you are to a subject if they find that you're talking about multiple subjects in it. But then you've got combined courses, which Tom will talk about, where you are actually applying to more than one course. So what do you do then? I'll pass things over to Tom from Swansea University to tell us. Over to you, Tom.
Personal statements for combined courses. So obviously this is going to build on a lot of what Becky and Arione have already said. I'm going to cover a bit more about exactly how you strike that balance between really talking as much about the subject as possible when you have to talk about more than one subject. So we'll start off, what is a combined course? So there's a few kind of different ways which we can frame what a combined course is. So generally, they are degrees which are made up of more than one subject. So they're all honours degrees, just like your single honours degrees, and they're therefore the same calibre as a single honours degree. So one of the questions I get asked pretty often is, if I do a joint honours in criminology and psychology, is that going to be the kind of same level of degree as if I only did kind of psychology on its own? The answer is yes, they're all honours at the end of the day. And joint honours degrees are a combination of two subjects, and your time is generally going to be split 50-50 throughout your 3 years. So with those, you'll see the subject is going to be called something like accounting and finance, and the and denotes that they're of kind of equal value. And then you can also have, they're not as common, but you can have the kind of major minor degrees, which are a combination of two subjects, where one has a slightly greater focus and the second one is more complementary to the first. So with those, we have, for example, law with criminology, and the with kind of denotes that the law, you're generally going to be spending more of your time focusing on that kind of first subject there. And there are also things such as triple honours degrees. They're pretty uncommon, but what that is it allows a student to study 3 subjects if they want to. They do have the option to kind of cut that down to 2 after the first year. So going into second and third year, they can decide if they want to keep with just the 3 or drop down to 2 as well. And then you can also have a kind of, fairly uncommon situation, but it definitely does happen, where you're applying for, say, 3 or 4 courses that are pretty much the same course, and the last one is really quite different to the rest. And I'll talk about how you can kind of balance that with your personal statement. So we've already, of course, covered quite a bit of this already. So what is a personal statement? So I'll be pretty brief about this. So you only have that one personal statement for all your choices. So it has to be relevant to all of them. So you shouldn't be dropping any kind of names or kind of course names with that. Obviously, you're pressed for kind of how much you can write on there. So you get 47 lines, which is around 4,000 characters, which is about one side of A4. Now, this might seem a bit unfair because if you're doing a single honours, you know, you can just really write quite a bit about why you love that one subject. With a joint honours, you obviously have to kind of balance your time between those 2 subjects, and you have the exact same amount of space doing that as well. And then you should also be demonstrating your kind of interests, skills, expertise, why you're an ideal fit for the course. And then obviously that's a bit trickier because you're kind of trying to explain why you're a good fit for almost 2 different courses, really. And then it's also worth talking about qualities and achievements. Now with these, it's totally okay if your 2 subjects are fairly different to kind of talk about how one quality or one achievement or one skill is particularly useful for one of your subjects, and these other set of achievements and skills are useful for the other subjects. So what makes a good personal statement? So start thinking about what gets you excited about the combined courses you're applying for, and then just start writing about them. So obviously we've kind of mentioned this already, is that really what you want to do is just not really worry about that first sentence and just go straight into kind of writing down exactly what's on your mind about your personal statement, exactly why you're enthused about doing it. And then you'll be pretty amazed at just how much information you've got on there. Usually you're going to have a lot more than your kind of 4,000 characters, but that's fine. As we said, you kind of look at that later on and refine that down. And then what you do want to be is positive. You know, you've got to be very enthusiastic about the courses that you want to study. You want to talk about what inspired your decision. And the chances are is that if you're doing a joint honours, you have a particular reason why you're really enthusiastic about the kind of doing those 2 courses together there. Talk about transferable skills that are going to help you on the course. And of course, talk about you, what makes you unique, exciting, interesting. And the good thing is that obviously you are fairly unique in that most students go for a single honours. So there's already that kind of edge that you have by doing a joint honours. And there's really a lot that can be said about that as well, which I'll talk about in a second. And of course, it's been said already, but back it up with evidence. You can't just say things that, you know, I'm passionate about the subject. You have to say why. You have to give evidence. You have to show us that you've kind of put in the time and kind of develop these interests in these courses over time. So a few of the transferable skills that we have, leadership, commitment, teamwork, time management. Now, with these, they're going to fit into kind of different subjects in fairly unique ways. So say if you're looking at history and politics as a joint kind of option there, you're going to have a lot of time when you're spending your own independent research time, kind of studying, writing dissertations. You're going to have less kind of face-to-face stuff. You might also be doing a few presentations with classmates. So some of the really good kind of transferable skills for that would be things like teamwork, time management, and leadership. So it's really good if you can kind of work in, if you have any work experience or kind of extracurricular stuff, how they've developed these skills and how well they're going to work for the kind of subjects that you're looking at. Now, what do you need to do for your combined course? So this is where it starts to get a little bit different, and how you can really kind of build up that personal statement based on a combined course here. So what you need to do is explain why you're interested in both aspects of a combined course, and always keep a balance between the 2. So there's no point in kind of talking a lot about one of the subjects that you want to study and only mentioning the other one a little bit, because it needs to be 50-50. Otherwise, the admissions staff are going to kind of think, well, why don't they just do this as a single honours on its own? And then kind of second to that, you want to be as enthusiastic as possible about both the subjects, and explain in equal segments, once again, how you've developed your interest in both. So that is going to be quite difficult because you are going to have to spend less time really talking about each subject than if you're doing a single honours. You really should kind of explain your enthusiasm in both those subjects, and also be enthusiastic about how the kind of subjects work well together, how they kind of complement each other, and how they almost form a new subject by being combined. So part of that is going to be explaining why you think the 2 courses work well together. You know, you're going to be answering questions such as, why do you think it's beneficial to study psychology and criminology? Perhaps there's a particular career that you've thought of that would really work well with, or perhaps it's a particular experience you had while you were in school that kind of pointed towards those 2 subjects together. But yeah, definitely make sure you're kind of explaining why you want to do them together rather than one or the other individually. And then one thing that I'd recommend is just show that you're thinking ahead. So that a lot of your degree, with a lot of your joint honours, you're going to have the chance to do maybe a placement year, maybe a year abroad. And if you want to do those, kind of talk about that and say if you've thought about where you'd like to study or where you'd like to have a placement. Say, for example, if you're looking at studying international relations and French, for example, you'd obviously really benefit from having a kind of placement year or a year abroad, being somewhere where they have French as a first language. So talk a bit about that. Say that you've kind of thought about doing that, because what it does is it shows us that you're really considering where this degree can take you. And also, don't be afraid to talk about long-term aims. I think sometimes people can be put off talking about the kind of career after university, because they're just getting into university now, they're kind of focusing on that. But don't be afraid to talk about where that degree might take you. And that's something that can be really good for joint honours as well, because they're fairly specific degrees, so they're really useful kind of going forwards afterwards. So say you're looking at something like psychology and criminology. I mean, do you want to go into kind of like criminal profiling afterwards, a detective in the police? We've had students look at things like law and criminology, and they needed those two subjects to go together because they wanted to be a war crime investigator. They wanted to work for the UN. And what you really need is law, but you also need that angle of criminology there as well. So don't be afraid to talk about that and where that degree is going to take you, because it does show that you've put a lot of thought into this and you are really keen. So we do have a few things to avoid. So these are going to be fairly specific to what you need to avoid with your kind of joint honours personal statements. So if your top 5 choices are subtly different, so for example, say 3 of the choices are for a history and politics degree, and the other 2 choices are for something like history and European studies degree, you want to avoid using the exact same degree name. So you don't want to say that you're really interested in doing history and politics. You're going to instead have to look for common themes between the subjects and talk about those. So the reason for that is if you're the admissions officer and you know that what you offer is history and European studies, and this student is talking about history and politics, you're going to think, well, we don't offer that. Obviously, we're not the first choice for these students, so we'll choose someone else over them. So what you need to do as a student is look at those different courses that you're looking at, break down the kind of the modules and the course themes that are going to be covered there, and really pick out all the themes that are the same across all of those, which would be very good if those are the themes that kind of interest you as well. And then what you want to do is talk about exactly why you're interested in looking at those themes. So by kind of keeping it just to themes rather than talking about actual subjects or module names, you're playing it fairly safe, but you're also kind of getting across why you're enthusiastic, and that you also kind of know the course content as well there. So a bit further to that as well is don't talk about a specific module at one university, because that does look odd to the other universities who don't offer that module. So you do want to be really kind of, I don't want to say vague, just be very, very careful about not mentioning exact specific modules for that. So one of the easiest kind of pitfalls to fall into would be talking too enthusiastically about one subject and not enough about the other. So you really want to avoid that and try and split it up equally. And I'll talk a bit about a good tactic to that in a minute here. And this is because joint honours do have an equal split. You are literally picking, say, 60 credits from one of those courses and 60 credits from the other course. It's a 50-50 split. So the exception to this, of course, is major minor degrees, but it's still very useful to be enthusiastic about both subject areas, maybe a 60%, 40% kind of split with that. But the last thing you want to do is kind of forget to mention the other subjects. And then at the end of the day, the admissions officer will see that and kind of think, well, they're obviously not that keen on this degree if they're only talking about this one subject area, so why don't they just do a single on this? It is worth mentioning, and this is really if you have kind of 4 choices which are fairly similar, and your 5th choice is very, very different. So perhaps it's that one university offers a really kind of niche course that you're really interested in, but no other universities offer that. So you apply for 4 different courses, which are all kind of fairly similar. So it is actually okay to email the university and ask them if you can send them a different personal statement. So it's not completely unheard of. And at the end of the day, if you think it really would be impossible to kind of cover all areas for the 5 courses within one personal statement, then by all means, just let the university know, ask them if you can do that. Be honest, you'll have to be very convincing about it anyway, but if you have a good reason to, you should be convincing anyway. And most universities will at least be willing to consider this as well, if you are really stuck. So a slight way to kind of plan this out for your joint honours degrees, for your personal statements. Obviously, you have your beginning, middle, and end, and I'll talk a bit about how to kind of structure it and balance between your 2 subjects. So really, what you want to be doing with this is, in the beginning, you want to broadly outline why you want to study this combined course. and how you became interested in that. So it's going to be the same as what we've kind of mentioned earlier, the Becky Arione. But with this one, to make it a bit easier, because you're obviously talking about 2 subject areas, you want to talk about one subject first and then the other. And then what you want to do then is tie those 2 together with a few sentences explaining how well they're going to work together. Because the danger with this is you do kind of one sentence about one subject, the next sentence about the other subject, and kind of back and forth. And it's really easy for the reader to get lost in that. And it's really difficult to kind of discern what your point is with that. So to make it easier for yourself and for the reader, do either a paragraph or a segment which explains your enthusiasm for the first subject, then the second subject, and then of course tie them together, say why they work well together, say how they have a kind of synergy together. And then with the middle, what you want to do is emphasize your skills, talk about work experience. It doesn't have to be related to the course that you're looking at. And then the evidence that proves your interest in the course and your personal qualities here. So there's a bit of an art form for this, because you do have to kind of balance what skills and qualities are useful for each side of your chosen combined subjects. So if you're looking at 2 subjects which are fairly similar, you're kind of in luck here. So say history and politics, then you should be talking about how your skills will help you with both subjects. So obviously both of those are going to require kind of organizational skills, presentation skills, things like critical thinking. So you can kind of use the same experience, the same skills, and kind of apply those to history and politics. However, if your subjects are fairly different and require different skills, so French and international relations, for example, it's fine to discuss how some skills will work well for one of those and how some skills will work well for the other of those. For example, international relations, similarly to history and politics, you're looking at things like critical thinking. So talk about how your experiences have kind of given you those skills for university for critical thinking. And then don't worry about applying those to French. So with French, obviously it's a totally different aspect. Talk about things like extracurricular work you've done with French, talk about your fluency in that, if you've ever done any trips to France and kind of put that into practice. But it's completely okay to kind of separate your skills for the 2 of these here. And then finally, at the end of that, is you kind of want to tie it together with what makes you unique about this and will make you fit into the course you're interested in. So aim for 1 to 2 sentences that kind of reiterate everything that you've already said for this and why you're an ideal match for the combined course. I suppose you are in luck here because you are fairly unique in that joint honours tend to be fairly uncommon in the grand scheme of things. So just talk about exactly what it is that you want to do, why you want to do this, and really just kind of round home that last point there. So just to kind of recap on all of this, strive to make your statement authentic. It's always got to be about you. You've got to make it a good combination of your head and your heart. So talk about the kind of sensibilities behind it, why you want to go into it, and also talk about your enthusiasm as well. Once again, make sure you do this kind of equally for both subjects there. And then also take your time. One of the really important things, as we've said before, 6 to 8 drafts. Make sure that you're not the only person reading it. Definitely send it to some friends, family, even admission staff and recruitment staff. A lot of universities are very happy to look over this kind of thing, just to have that kind of extra set of eyes. And then ultimately, you'll have something special that sums up what you are all about.